It wasn't on stage. It wasn't in a stadium. It wasn't during a performance in front of thousands of screaming fans. One of the most important nights of Freddie Mercury's life happened in a small upstairs bedroom, with no cameras, no spotlight, no music playing in the background. Just him. And Mary. The woman he had once asked to marry him. The woman he called the love of my life. The woman who would one day inherit most of his fortune. Because he never stopped feeling like he owed her a life that he couldn't quite give. It was the mid-1970s. Queen was rising fast. The band was starting to taste the kind of fame they had only dreamed of. Concerts, late-night sessions, interviews, money, parties, adoration, all of it was finally real. And yet, in the middle of all that noise, Freddie was carrying a secret that was getting too heavy to hide. He had proposed to Mary, slipped a ring on her finger, told her he wanted a future with her. But something inside him had started to split, a crack between the man he wanted to be for her, and the man he really was when the lights went out. One night, after months of denial, flirting, confusion, and guilt, Freddie came home later than usual. He went upstairs. Mary was waiting. She asked him a question he wasn't ready for. And for the first time, Freddie whispered the truth that would change both of them forever. "I can't be your husband. Something's wrong with me, and I don't think it's going to change." What did he tell her in that room? How did Mary react when the man she loved told her he could never love her in the way she deserved? And why, after that night, did she stay in his life as the one person he trusted more than anyone? Keep watching. Because this quiet, painful conversation in a small flat reveals the moment Freddie Mercury stopped lying to the person he loved most, and to himself. The ring had seemed like a good idea at the time. Freddie remembered the night he bought it, his fingers shaking slightly as he inspected the little velvet box in the jeweler's hand. It wasn't extravagant by his later standards, not dripping in diamonds, nothing that screamed rock star excess. It was delicate. Tasteful. Elegant. The sort of ring Mary would love. He'd watched her through the shop window earlier that week, when she didn't know he was there. She had been looking at the same display, eyes soft, face tilted slightly to the side as if she were imagining someone else's story, someone else's proposal. Freddie had walked away that day with a strange tug in his chest. A longing for something he'd never really had, stability, normality, the quiet kind of love that didn't need an audience. So he'd gone back. Chose the ring. Paid. Put the box deep in his pocket like a secret he was proud of. That night, their little flat had smelled like cheap red wine and cigarette smoke. Mary had been sitting cross-legged on the floor in faded jeans and an oversized sweater, flipping through a magazine. Queen records, posters, half-finished lyrics, abandoned mugs, shirts draped over chairs, the apartment looked like two lives trying to grow in the same space. "Darling," Freddie had said then, his heart pounding in a way it never did on stage. "I've got something for you." Mary had looked up, amused. "If it's another one of your ridiculous shirts, I'm saying no." He'd laughed. "No shirts. Something better." He had dropped to one knee more playfully than traditionally, because it felt safer that way, easier to turn into a joke if she looked scared. But when he opened the box, the room changed. All the air seemed to leave it. Mary's hand flew to her mouth. "Freddie," she'd breathed. He hadn't given himself time to overthink it. "Marry me," he said. "Be my wife. Let's make something of this madness." She'd stared at him, eyes filling with tears, and then she'd said yes. Of course she did. Because she loved him, and because at that time, it still seemed possible that Freddie Mercury, or Farrokh Bulsara, the man underneath, could settle into a life where the stage and the home could coexist without clashing. The ring went on her finger. It looked beautiful there. But in the weeks that followed, Freddie began to notice something that gnawed at him. The ring fit her. The idea didn't quite fit him. At first, he ignored it. Threw himself into the new album. Late-night sessions, drinking, jokes, the usual revolving door of characters passing through their orbit. Mary went to work in the boutique by day, came home to him at night, humming songs she'd heard on the radio, asking how the recording was going. And yet, somewhere between the nights in the studio and the nights at home, Freddie felt a distance grow inside him like a hairline crack through glass. There were moments, quiet ones, when Mary would be washing dishes or reading in bed, and he'd look at her and feel a deep, genuine love, accompanied by something else he couldn't name. A restlessness. A wrongness. A sense that he was playing a part in a play that wasn't written for him. He started staying out later. At first, it was just with the band. Drinks after sessions. A club here, a party there. The growing recognition fed something in him that had always been hungry, the thrill of being desired, wanted, watched. And then, slowly, there were other things. Lingering touches. Looks that lasted too long. Conversations with men that didn't feel like jokes anymore. Freddie noticed the way his heart beat when a man in a bar, dark eyes, confident smile, cigarette perched between his fingers, brushed past him and didn't apologize. The way electricity shot through him when he leaned in to say something in Freddie's ear and didn't move away immediately. He laughed it off afterward, told himself he'd had too much to drink, that it was just fun, that everyone flirted with everyone in their circle. Rock and roll, darling. No rules. But the feelings didn't fade. They deepened. One night, much later than he should have, Freddie came home and found Mary sitting up in bed, the lamp still on. The ring caught the light as she turned a page in her book. She looked up when he entered, eyes tired but warm. "You're late," she said. He shrugged, stripping off his jacket. Things ran over. She studied him. "You smell like smoke and something else." "Jealousy?" he teased weakly. She didn't smile. He crawled into bed beside her, kissed her temple, felt her lean into him. Her body was familiar, comforting. He loved her, he knew he did. But as he lay there staring at the ceiling while she curled into his side and slowly drifted off, Freddie felt a sickening twist in his stomach. Was this what husbands felt? Was this all in his head? Was he broken? He squeezed his eyes shut, as if he could will himself into alignment with the life he'd asked for. Somewhere inside, a thought rose, uninvited, terrifying. This ring doesn't belong on her finger. Not because she didn't deserve it. But because he didn't deserve her like this. He turned his head and watched her sleeping, the relaxed lines of her face, the trust in her softness when she was near him. He loved her. He loved her so much it hurt. And yet, something was missing. Something essential. The realization, once it came, refused to leave. As the band grew bigger, as the concerts expanded, as more people screamed his name from further away, a part of him kept shrinking, curling in on itself, whispering, "You're living a lie." And one night, that lie would finally become too heavy to carry safely. The night began like so many others. London outside was wet and glittering, the streets reflecting neon signs and headlights as rain traced restless patterns down the windows. Inside the flat, it was warm, too warm, Freddie thought, tugging at his shirt collar as he stepped through the door. He'd been out again. Another long meeting, another vague explanation. The truth was murkier. A bar. A man whose name he pretended not to care about. Laughter that sounded too loud in his own ears. Hands that lingered too long. A kiss in a dimly lit corner that left him shaken and exhilarated and ashamed all at once. He'd fled before anything more could happen. He told himself that counted as control. Now, standing in the small entryway of the home he shared with Mary, he felt the walls closing in. "Mary," he called lightly, forcing cheer into his voice. "Have you run off with a richer man yet?" His voice echoed. No answer. For a brief second, panic flared in him. What if she was gone? What if she'd finally had enough of his late nights and evasive answers and wandering eyes? Then he heard it, soft footsteps upstairs, a drawer opening, closing. He exhaled slowly. "Up here," she called. He climbed the stairs, heart hammering in his chest for reasons that had nothing to do with the climb. Mary was in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed. The lamp beside her cast a warm circle of light, leaving the corners of the room in shadow. Her hair was loosely tied back, tendrils falling around her face. She wore one of his old shirts, sleeves rolled up, the hem brushing her thighs. She looked young. Familiar. Safe. Freddy froze in the doorway for a heartbeat, hit by a strange sense of déjà vu. He'd seen her like this on so many nights, waiting, book in hand, light on, eyes ready to soften at the sight of him. But tonight, something was different. She wasn't reading. She was holding her left hand in her right, thumb rubbing absently over the engagement ring. Freddy's chest tightened. "You're late," she said. He flashed a grin. "You're beautiful." She didn't smile. "Where were you?" she asked. Her tone wasn't accusing, but it wasn't casual either. It was something in between, a careful question from someone who had been waiting too long for an honest answer. "Out," he replied, shrugging off his jacket. "Band things. You know. Music, egos, bad hair. Freddy." His name in her voice made him stop. He turned slowly. She was watching him with eyes that were too clear, too knowing. "Sit down," she said. There was a tremor in her voice he couldn't quite place. He tried to deflect. "Sounds ominous. Are you breaking up with me? Because if you are, I demand snacks." "Freddy," she said again. "Please." The plea in the word cut through his bravado. He sat down on the chair by the dressing table, facing her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence grew between them, thick and heavy, filled with all the things they hadn't said in months. Finally, Mary looked down at her hand. "I took the ring off today," she said quietly. Freddy felt the air leave his lungs. Before he could stop himself, his eyes dropped to her left hand. The ring was back on. But he could see the faint indent around her finger, the slight redness where it had been removed and then returned. "What do you mean?" he asked, though he knew exactly what she meant. "I took it off," she repeated. "I put it on the dresser. I walked away. I made tea. I sat in the kitchen and stared at it for an hour." He swallowed. "Why?" She met his gaze. "Because," she said slowly, "I don't think you really want to marry me." The room seemed to tilt. Freddy opened his mouth, a denial ready on his tongue. "Of course I want to marry you. Of course I love you. Don't be silly." But the words died before they could leave. He couldn't lie to her. Not like that. Not anymore. You're imagining things, he tried, weakly. You're overthinking, darling. You always do. No, she said softly. This time, I'm not. She took a breath. You come home later and later. You can't look me in the eye when I ask where you've been. You touch me like it's a duty, not a desire. And when I talk about the wedding, you change the subject. He felt naked under her gaze. Mary. Look at me, she said. He did. Her eyes were shining, but not with anger. Not yet. With a kind of sad clarity. I love you, she said. You know that. I have loved you for years. But love isn't enough if you, her voice faltered. If you don't want this. Not the way I do. He tried to laugh it off. Of course I want this. I bought the ring, didn't I? I'm not in the business of buying expensive jewelry for women I don't intend to keep. Freddy. It was the third time that night she'd said his name like that, a plea, a warning, a mirror. He looked away. Are you seeing someone? She asked quietly. His heart lurched. What? No. Don't be absurd. Then are you? She hesitated. The words seemed to catch on something inside her. Are you interested in someone? Another man's face flashed, uninvited, in his mind. A hand on his arm. A body too close. A kiss he'd let happen, and then run from. He swallowed hard. Mary, he said, it's not that simple. Her voice shook. Then make it simple. Tell me the truth. Everything in him screamed to run. To joke. To say something dazzling and distracting. Turn this into a comedy, not a confession. Instead, for the first time, he found himself too tired to perform. The ring on her finger glittered under the lamp. It looked right there. It just didn't feel right inside him. And he knew, with horrible certainty, that whatever came out of his mouth next would change everything, not just tonight, not just the engagement, but the very shape of their lives. He took a breath that felt like stepping off a ledge. Mary, he whispered, something's wrong with me. And in the silence that followed, they both understood. The night they'd been avoiding had finally arrived. For a moment after Freddy whispered, something's wrong with me, Mary didn't move. The room did the breathing for both of them, the soft hum of the lamp, the muted patter of rain against the window, the faint creak of the old wooden floor beneath Freddy's restless foot. Mary's eyes stayed fixed on him, wide and steady, waiting. Not assuming, not accusing, just waiting. Freddy wished she would interrupt him. Tell him he was being dramatic. Tell him he was tired. Tell him everything was fine. But Mary knew him too well for that. Tell me, she said softly. Freddy looked down at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. His rings caught the warm light, glittering beautifully, too beautifully. He didn't feel beautiful. He felt like a lie wrapped in sequins. It's hard to explain, he murmured. It's not something you just say. Mary's voice didn't tremble, but her fingers tightened around the ring on her hand. Is it about us? The words hit him like a punch. He lifted his head slowly, seeing the fear in her eyes, not fear of him, but fear for him. Fear of what she already suspected but didn't want to believe. Freddy opened his mouth. Closed it. Tried again. I love you, Mary, he said quietly. You must believe that. I do, she whispered. But love isn't always enough. He felt something rip inside him. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles turned white. There are things I feel, he began slowly, things I've always felt, that I've tried to ignore. Things I thought would go away once we got engaged. Once we settled. Once I became the man I thought I was supposed to be. Mary's breath caught. She knew. She didn't want to know, but she knew. Freddy, she said gently, are you saying, you're not attracted to me? He snapped his head up, horror in his eyes. No. God, no. You're beautiful. You're everything. There's nothing about you that. Then what is it? She asked, voice breaking. He felt tears sting his eyes. It's not you, darling, he whispered. It's me. I'm the problem. Something in me is, he swallowed hard. Different. Mary's voice dropped to a whisper. Different how? Freddy stared at the carpet, tracing invisible patterns with his gaze, wishing the floor would split open and swallow him whole. There are urges, he said finally, the word feeling ugly on his tongue. Thoughts I don't want. Attractions I don't understand. Moments with, his voice faltered. With men. Mary closed her eyes. Not dramatically. Not in shock. Just, confirming what her heart had already begun preparing for. And these moments, she said gently, they mean something to you? Freddy's throat tightened so painfully he had to force the words out. I don't know, he said. That's the most frightening part. I don't know what any of it means. I just know I can't ignore it anymore. I can't pretend it isn't there. Silence. A heavy, heartbreaking silence. Mary opened her eyes again, shining with tears but calm, painfully calm. When did you start feeling this way? She asked. Freddy let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. A long time ago, he whispered. Before the band took off. Before the ring. Before everything. She nodded slowly, absorbing each word like a wound. And you didn't tell me. He shook his head shamefully. I thought I could outrun it. By marrying me? I thought loving you would fix me, he said, voice cracking. And in some ways, it did. You made me better. You made me visible. You made me feel like I could be someone worthy. Mary's tears finally spilled over. But not someone honest, she said softly. Freddy's face crumpled. Please don't hate me, he whispered. I don't, she said immediately, shaking her head. Freddy. I don't. I never could. That made his tears fall. He covered his face with one hand, shoulders shaking. Mary stood slowly, walked across the room, and sat beside him on the chair. She didn't touch him yet, not because she didn't want to, but because she sensed he needed a moment to breathe inside the truth he'd just spoken. Freddy, she said gently, why didn't you tell me sooner? He laughed weakly, a bitter, hollow sound. Because I didn't want it to be true. And now? He dropped his hand, revealing eyes red and wet. Now I can't pretend anymore, he said. Not to you. Not to myself. Mary nodded, tearful but brave, so brave it made Freddy ache. What do you want? She asked softly. The question hit him like a blow. What did he want? A version of himself that didn't exist. A life he thought he should have. A love he couldn't name properly. A truth he'd been terrified to face. He took a trembling breath. I want you to be free of the lie, he whispered. I want you to have a life with someone who can be what I can't. Mary closed her eyes, pressing her lips together to keep them from trembling. And what about you? She asked. Freddy swallowed hard. I don't know, he admitted. But I can't be your husband. I can't promise you a future built on half-truths. I can't give you the kind of love you deserve. For the first time all night, Mary reached out and took his hand. Her touch was warm. Human. Steady. You gave me love, she said softly. Real love. Even if it wasn't the same kind you're trying to find, it was real. And it mattered. Freddy sobbed, a quiet, broken sound. Mary squeezed his hand. You didn't break me, she whispered. You just need to stop breaking yourself. And for the first time in his life, Freddy allowed himself to admit the truth. He wasn't broken. He was scared. And fear wasn't the same as shame. Not anymore. Mary didn't let go of Freddy's hand. Not even after the truth had settled between them like smoke in a room where all the windows were shut. Her thumb traced small circles across his knuckles as if trying to remind him of something he had forgotten. You are human. You are allowed to be lost. You are allowed to tell the truth. Freddy, still trembling, stared down at their joined hands. I never wanted to hurt you, he whispered. Mary gave a soft, sad smile. I know. I tried so hard to be the man you deserved. You were, she said gently. Just not the way you thought. Her softness undid him. He bowed his head, shoulders shaking with silent sobs he tried and failed to contain. Mary waited. When he finally lifted his face, eyes red and shining, the courage he needed was sitting in her expression, steady, heartbreaking, unflinching. She loved him. Not less. Just differently now. And that love was about to be tested. Mary, Freddy began, voice raw. I think, we need to end the engagement. There it was. The sentence neither of them wanted to say, spoken aloud for the first time. It cracked through the room like a quiet, devastating lightning strike. Mary inhaled slowly. She didn't gasp. She didn't cry out. She didn't collapse. Instead, she closed her eyes, once, deeply, as if absorbing the blow with all the grace she had. When she opened them again, her tears finally fell. I know, she said softly. Freddy froze. You do. She nodded. I think I've known for a while. I was just waiting for you to be ready to say it. But you didn't ask, he said, voice breaking. I wanted you to trust me enough to tell me yourself. That sentence hit him harder than anything else. He looked away, ashamed. I'm so sorry, he whispered. Mary squeezed his hand. Don't apologize for telling the truth. Apologize for trying to live without it. He let out a choked laugh and wiped at his eyes. You always were the wise one. And you were always the dramatic one, she said gently. A perfect match in some ways, a disaster in others. Silence settled again, not cold, not distant. Just full. Mary took a deep breath and looked down at the ring on her finger. The engagement ring. The promise. The hope. The future they had both imagined and neither could truly inhabit. Her fingers moved slowly, almost reverently. Freddy, she said, voice trembling now, I love you. You know that. But if we stay engaged, we'll both lose ourselves. He nodded, tears gathering again. "We need to let this part go," she whispered. He nodded harder, unable to form any words. And then Mary did something that shattered him more beautifully than any heartbreak he had ever witnessed. She slid the ring off her finger. Not angrily. Not dramatically. Not as punishment. But gently. Lovingly. Like releasing a bird she never wanted to cage. She placed the ring in his open palm and folded his fingers around it. "It doesn't mean goodbye," she said. "It just means, not like this." Freddy stared at his closed hand, chest tightening around a small piece of metal that had once felt like certainty. Now it felt like a memory, a precious one, yes, but still a memory. "Mary," he whispered, unable to lift his head. "I don't want to lose you." She reached up and cupped his cheek. "You won't," she said firmly. "You'll lose the lie. Not me." Freddy leaned into her touch, eyes closing as another tear slipped free. "I don't know who I am without you," he admitted. Her thumb brushed the tear away. And for the first time that night, she smiled softly, a sad, knowing smile. "That's the part you'll have to learn," she said. "And I'll help you. But not as your wife." He opened his eyes, gazing at her with something close to awe. "How can you be so kind to me?" he asked. Mary laughed, a broken, tender sound. "Because you're Freddy. Because you've given me more love than most people get in a lifetime. Because I know you're not leaving me, you're just trying to stop pretending." He swallowed hard, the emotion swelling in his chest until it threatened to drown him. "I don't want to pretend anymore," he whispered. "Good." She tucked a piece of hair behind his ear in a gesture so intimate it nearly undid him again. "Then we start tonight. With honesty." Freddy nodded, tears falling freely now. "Will you stay?" he asked, voice small. "I'll always stay," she said. "Just, on a different shelf in your life than the one we planned." He let out a soft, shaking breath, the sound of relief and grief intertwined. Mary leaned forward and rested her forehead against his. "I'm not walking away from you," she whispered. "I'm just walking with you differently." Freddy closed his eyes, absorbing every word. The ring sat warm in his clenched fist. The truth sat warm in the room between them. Nothing was the same. Everything was more honest. The engagement had ended. But the love, complicated, reshaped, transformed, remained. And in that quiet bedroom, under the soft yellow glow of the lamp, Freddie Mercury realized something. Some soulmates aren't meant to be spouses. Some loves aren't meant to be romantic. And some endings aren't endings at all. They're beginnings with different names. Morning came quietly. There was no dramatic sunrise, no symbolic beam of light cutting through the curtains. Just the soft, gray glow of a London sky, muted, hesitant, unsure, as if even the weather knew the air inside the flat had changed forever. Freddie awoke slowly, the heaviness of the previous night settling into his chest before he fully remembered why. He blinked up at the ceiling, his mind foggy, heart pounding with that strange mixture of grief and relief that only comes after telling a long-buried truth. Beside him, the bed was empty. Mary wasn't there. Not because she had left him, but because she had given him space. Even in heartbreak, she was thoughtful. He sat up, rubbing his face with both hands. His eyes still burned from crying. His head throbbed. His throat was raw, his emotions bruised. He felt like he had been taken apart and put back together wrong, but somehow more honestly. He looked down at his palm. The ring was still there. He had slept clutching it. He opened his fingers slowly, like unwrapping a wound. The gold band rested against his skin, warm from his touch, but no longer heavy in the same way. It wasn't a promise anymore. It was history. Memory. A symbol of a love that had changed shape overnight. He closed his hand again, not ready to put it anywhere. Not yet. Freddy threw on a robe and padded down the stairs. The house felt both familiar and foreign, as if last night had rearranged the molecules in the air. He smelled coffee, strong, black, the way Mary liked it. She was in the kitchen, standing near the small window, her hands wrapped around a mug. She wasn't crying. She wasn't hiding either. She turned when she heard him. Their eyes met. And for the first time in months, Freddy didn't feel the urge to pretend. "Morning," Mary said softly. He swallowed. "Morning." Her eyes flicked to his hand, the one still curled around the ring. "You still have it," she noted gently. "I didn't know where to put it," he admitted. She nodded. "You don't have to decide today." He hesitated, then took a step closer. "Mary, how are you?" A small, sad smile tugged at her lips. "Heartbroken," she said simply. "But not angry." Freddy exhaled shakily. "That makes one of us," he said. "I'm furious with myself." She shook her head. "Don't be. Truth is never the enemy." He sat at the small kitchen table, hands trembling slightly. Mary poured him a cup of coffee and set it in front of him, just as she had 1,000 mornings before. But this morning, the gesture felt ceremonial, like the beginning of a new arrangement neither of them knew how to define yet. "Mary," he began. "Are you going to move out?" She looked startled. "Do you want me to?" "No." His voice broke. "God, no. I couldn't bear it. I just thought, maybe you'd want distance. Or, freedom." Mary pulled out the chair across from him and sat, resting her elbows on the table. "Freddy," she said gently, "I don't want to leave you. I don't want to vanish from your life. But things will need to change." He nodded. "I know." She took a breath. "I think, we should have separate bedrooms." He swallowed, feeling a pang he didn't expect. "Yes. You're right. And we should give each other room to breathe. We don't have to untangle everything in one day." He nodded again, grateful and devastated all at once. "But," she added firmly, "we don't stop being each other's person." Freddy looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said, leaning forward, "you don't go through this alone. Whatever you're feeling, whatever you're discovering about yourself, I'm not leaving you to drown in it. You don't need to hide from me." Something warm, painful, but warm, spread through his chest. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Maybe not," she said with a small laugh, brushing a tear from her cheek. "But I chose you anyway." Freddy covered his face with his hands, overwhelmed. Mary reached out and gently pulled his hands down. "Look at me," she said. He did. "You're not broken," she told him. "You're figuring yourself out. And I want to stay close enough to help, but far enough to let you become whoever you're meant to be." Freddy felt tears well again. But they weren't the same tears as last night. These were gentler. Relief-colored. "Mary," he whispered, "you're my home." "I know," she said softly. "And you're mine. Just not in the way we planned." He laughed through a tear. "Do we tell the others?" The band? Eventually. She shrugged. They'll make jokes. Bad ones. But they'll love you anyway. He smiled weakly. I hope so. She squeezed his hand. And Freddy, when the time comes, when you're ready to explore what all this means, promise me something. He blinked. Anything. Don't do it alone, she said. Don't hide in shadows. Don't torture yourself. Let people care for you. Let yourself have the life that fits. Freddy swallowed hard. I'll try. And put the ring somewhere safe, she added gently. Not because you'll wear it again, but because it mattered. He nodded, a lump in his throat. Mary stood and moved to him. She placed a kiss on his hair, not romantic, not desperate, just tender. A new kind of love. Whatever happens next, she whispered, we walk forward honestly. Freddy closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. And for the first time in his life, the path ahead looked terrifying. But it didn't look lonely. It was weeks later, maybe months. Freddy could never measure that period of his life by calendar days. Time moved differently then. It didn't pass, it unfolded. Slowly. Delicately. Painfully. And beautifully. The engagement had ended, but Mary hadn't gone anywhere. She moved into the spare room, painted it the color she liked, a soft blue that Freddy pretended to hate but secretly adored. She organized her things, added plants, bought a reading lamp. She made the house feel lived in, grounded, real. Sometimes Freddy would pass her doorway and see her sitting cross-legged on her bed, reading, hair tied back. And he felt something warm and unbreakable settle inside him. They hadn't lost each other. They had just stopped trying to fit into a shape that was never theirs. The band noticed the changes long before Freddy said a word. Brian asked quietly one day, Freddy, are you doing all right? Roger joked about domestic drama, but there was concern behind the teasing. John, quiet as ever, simply offered him a cigarette and a nod, the kind of gesture men like him used when they didn't know how to ask what was wrong. Freddy didn't explain much. Just said things were different. He wasn't ready to share the truth with them, not all of it, not yet. But Mary knew. Mary always knew. Every night, after the band rehearsed or after Freddy came back from long studio sessions, they would find themselves in the kitchen again, the same place where the truth had broken him open. Only now, he wasn't trembling. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't apologizing for existing. He was learning who he was. Some nights they sat in silence. Some nights they talked about everything except the engagement, new songs, clothes, gossip, ridiculous stories from touring. But some nights. The fragile ones. Freddy would sit with his elbows on the table, twisting the ring slowly between his fingers, and ask questions he had never asked aloud before. Mary, do you think something's wrong with me? No, she'd answer gently. I think something was hurting you. Do you think I'm selfish? No. I think you were scared. Do you think I'll ever be normal? Mary would smile sadly. Freddy, you were never meant to be normal. He laughed every time she said it. He cried sometimes too. The ring remained on the kitchen windowsill, not banished, not worshipped, just present. A reminder of a past that wasn't a mistake, only a lesson. A chapter that shaped them both. Then came the day Freddy realized the truth. He didn't miss being her fiancé. He missed being her person. And he hadn't lost that. One evening, He found Mary in the living room, watering a plant that was absolutely dead but that she refused to accept defeat over. "Mary," he said softly from the doorway. She turned. "Freddy." He hesitated, then stepped into the room and sat on the couch. She joined him without asking. "I keep thinking about that night," he said quietly. "When we ended the engagement." Mary didn't flinch. "So do I." He looked at her, really looked at her, her steady eyes, her resilience, the softness that never turned into weakness. "You saved me," he whispered. "Twice." Her brows furrowed. "Twice." "First by loving me," he said. "Then by letting me go." Mary's eyes filled instantly. "Freddy." He took her hand gently. "That night, it changed me. I thought I'd lose myself without you as my wife. But instead, I found out I could be honest with you in a way I couldn't be with anyone else." Mary swallowed hard. "That night didn't destroy us," she said quietly. "It redefined us." He laughed softly. "You always know how to put things right." They sat there in silence for a while, hands still intertwined. The kind of silence that doesn't demand anything, doesn't suffocate, doesn't ache. A silence built on trust. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if we'd married?" Freddy asked suddenly. Mary tilted her head. "Yes. And I think we would have loved each other terribly, and broken each other slowly." Freddy nodded. "I think so too. That doesn't mean it was wrong," she added. "It just wasn't meant to last in that shape." He smiled and leaned back. The rain had started again outside, a familiar London rhythm that always calmed him. The window reflected their silhouettes, side by side but not intertwined in the old way. And in that moment, Freddy saw it clearly. He hadn't lost Mary. He had gained something rarer. A soulmate who didn't need a label to stay. Mary stood, walked to the windowsill, and picked up the ring. "Do you want it?" she asked softly. Freddy shook his head. "Keep it," he said. "Not as a promise, but as a story." She looked at it for a long moment, then slipped it into a small wooden box on the shelf. A chapter closed. Not erased. They turned back to each other. "Freddy," Mary said gently, "you're going to love again. In the way that fits you. And I'm not going anywhere when that happens." His throat tightened. "I'm scared." "I know," she whispered. "But you'll be brave anyway." He laughed, wiping a tear. "You're too good for me." "No," she smiled, brushing his cheek. "We're good for each other. Just, differently than we thought." And in that moment, Freddie Mercury, the man who feared he was broken, unlovable, wrong, realized something profound. The night the engagement ended was not the night he lost love. It was the night he finally learned what real love looked like. Honesty. Space. Acceptance. A home that didn't demand pretending. A person who stayed, even when the shape of staying changed. Freddie exhaled, a long, trembling breath. He wasn't finished becoming himself. There were storms ahead. Secrets, discoveries, heartbreaks, joys, transformations. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would never walk through any of it alone. Because Mary, in the purest, truest sense, would always be the love of his life.